Are you a woman of faith who is struggling to navigate your current season of life? Do you feel like life is just happening to you instead of for you? My name is Jill Pack. I'm a certified life coach and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I want you to know that no matter your season or circumstance, it is possible to create a more joyful life. And I would love to show you how. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Seasons of Joy podcast. This is episode number 29 entitled, What Is? I'm so glad you're here today. I'm excited to share with you my message that I have for today, but I wanted to start out with an invitation. And the invitation is that you have today, if you're interested in coming to an awakening retreat with me up in Bear Lake next weekend, it's not too late. Registration, however, closes tonight at midnight. That is September 30th. Now, there are a few more spots open and available, and I would love to have you join me. So if you answer yes to any of the following questions, this retreat is for you. So do you feel like you're struggling in this mid-season of life? Do you feel disconnected with who you are? Do you not know what you even like anymore? Or believe that you don't have purpose in this new season of life? Are you struggling in your relationships with your spouse, your adult children? Do you feel disconnected from them? Do you find yourself wishing that the other people in your life would change so you could be happy? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then the Awakening Retreat is for you. We're going to work together as we apply tools that I will be teaching you to refocus, reconnect, to kind of find out and find solutions to those areas that you're struggling. And it's also an opportunity to rejuvenate. You're going to leave with tools that will help empower you to create something beautiful in your life. So there's a link in my show notes, and that will take you to the registration page where you can learn more and that you can register. So again, it's not too late. I would love to have you join me, but the doors close tonight at midnight. So to get on with the podcast, and this podcast is a little bit different this time. If you've listened to me very long, you know that I release my podcasts on Tuesdays. Now, I am still new at all of this, and so sometimes I'm recording that day's podcast that day. That is not uncommon because I am still moving and learning and growing in this business and in this podcasting world. So I try to plan ahead and get them recorded and get things in place so that they get out on time. But this just did not happen this week. I found myself just unable to meet that goal. And in the beginning, I was very discouraged. I felt like I had failed. I felt like people are going to think things about me. I'm not professional. I don't know what I'm doing. Some imposter syndrome even, right? Like people aren't going to take me seriously. I'm just this housewife, this middle-aged woman that's trying to put a podcast out there for maybe 10 listeners. I don't know. So all this stuff comes in my head because I'm resisting what is. And the truth is that I am figuring this out. I am a beginner. And it's okay. Nothing went wrong. And chances are you didn't even know that I'm not releasing my podcast on a Tuesday and that I'm releasing it on a Friday. And it's totally fine. It's okay. It just is. Doesn't make me bad at business. It doesn't make me a bad podcaster. It just is. And so if I can just embrace what is, I can create more of what I want. And what I want is to share my message. So I could have just thrown my hands up in the air, decided that I was terrible at this, and I just skipped this podcast this week and either quit podcasting in general, or I could just pick up again next week. But what I decided to do instead was accept what is. Okay, I missed my Tuesday deadline. I'm not going to release it when I thought, but I'm still going to release it. I'm still going to share my message and get it out there and put good into the world. Because at the end, That's my why. My why is to share good, and sometimes it's late, and that's okay. So it ties to my message so much this week. I find it a little bit ironic that what I'm talking about is something that I had to work on this week, and that is accepting what is. And again, it doesn't mean we love that piece of it per se, but that we just welcome it. It's like, okay, here it is. This is what is. Now what am I going to do with that? So as part of this podcast and this theme of what is, I want to talk about some of Byron Katie's teachings. Now, many of you probably have already heard of Byron Katie. You're familiar with her work, but I wanted to share a little bit of that here today. And she calls what she teaches the work. And this is made up of 4 questions followed by turnarounds that can give you a new perspective on any problem you're facing. So she is so inspiring and so full of wisdom. She's peaceful. She's kind. I highly recommend her book called Loving What Is, or just visiting her website. I think it's thework.com if you want to go and learn more about what she teaches. But I just am fascinated with her story, and I'm fascinated with the concepts she teaches and the good that she is putting out into the world. So I wanted to start by just giving you a little bit of her background that she actually shares in her book. And so she talks about when she was 43, she found herself on the floor of a halfway house in Southern California. And she, up to this point, she'd been married twice. She had 3 children. She actually even had a successful career. However, Byron Katie had entered into what she calls a 10-year downward spiral of rage, addiction, paranoia, and despair. And she says that for 2 years, she was so depressed that she could rarely leave her house, and that she would just stay in bed for weeks at a time. And she'd do business there, but she would be in her bed and work on her phone from her bedroom. She was unable to take care of just her basic hygiene needs, such as brushing her teeth, brushing her hair, or just even bathing. Her children were afraid of her. They would try to avoid her because they knew that at any time she could blow up, that she just would have this outburst of rage, and they didn't want to be there. So they would avoid her. But finally, Byron Katie decided, she came to a point in her life that she decided to check herself into somewhere to get help. And the only place that she could find that her insurance would cover was a halfway house for women with eating disorders. And even the residents there, the other residents, were so afraid of her that they actually placed her in an attic room all by herself. So she tells the story of waking up on the floor of this halfway house about a week or so later, and she didn't believe she was even worthy enough to have a bed. So that's why she was on the floor. So Byron Katie wakes up, and she doesn't know who she is or what she is, but her life was no longer the same. She knew she wasn't the same. And she describes this experience almost as a type of spiritual awakening. She had come to realize that the thoughts were the cause of all her pain. What she was thinking was causing her to suffer. And her inner questioning brought about a freedom from these old thoughts that were untrue. So after she returned home, everyone came to see that she actually was different. She was a completely different person. She had become a joyful and innocent person full of love. She was no longer that person of anger or rage. And people began to seek her out, trying to get help from her. And so from this experience, she has developed what she calls the work. And I wanted to share a little bit about that with you today. It ties in really what I've been talking about over the last few weeks about awareness and curiosity and compassion. And so I want to share a quote of hers from her book that I really love. It says, "I discovered that when I believed my thoughts, I suffered, but when I didn't believe them, I didn't suffer. And that this is true for every human being. Freedom is as simple as that. I found that suffering is optional. I found a joy within me that has never disappeared, not for a single moment. That joy is in everyone, always. And I invite you not to believe me. I invite you to test it for yourself. I love that statement because it really teaches kind of the overall gist of what her work is. And that it's that idea where our thoughts, believing these untrue thoughts are what cause us pain, are what cause us to suffer. And that suffering is optional. That we all have joy within us that needs to be discovered and that allows us to create such a beautiful life. And so again, she invites us to practice it, to learn for ourselves that this is true. So what she does is she begins her work with curiosity, and she calls it inquiry. And as I've taught before, inquiry or curiosity, right, needs to come from compassion and without judgment. It's questioning our thoughts and our beliefs because those are the source of all our pain. So if you go to her website, she has a worksheet called Judge Your Neighbor, and you can download it for free, and it will walk you through this process of the work. And I highly recommend you do that if this interests you at all. So basically, it starts off by having you do what I call a brain dump or a thought download. And she has like 6 or 7 questions on that worksheet that kind of gets your brain going. And you just get everything out on the paper. That is the goal, is to just get everything out of your head and really begin discovering what's going on for you in the moment. And it's important that you don't hold back. You write everything down. You write the good, the bad, the ugly, even those things that you wish or you don't want other people to know that you're really thinking, that we probably all think at one time or another. But the point is, you just get everything written down. And when it's all down on the paper, you begin what she calls the work. And it's like a written meditation. It's a slow process. It's a healing process, actually. That's how I view it. But it's these 4 questions that she asks. That is it. So the first question, and we'll talk about each one, and I'll give you some examples. So the first one is it true? And this is like what I teach when I talk about circumstances versus thoughts. And then we ask if that thought is true. So when you get everything down, oftentimes she'll have you come up with, more than one troubling thought. You're going to have maybe 5 or 6. But for the sake of this discussion, we're just going to focus on one thought. So if you did a download about your adult child, right? You're writing about your adult child and you write about a situation that you had with them, right? And you're going to try to question one of those troubling statements. And the answer yes or no is what we're looking for. And there's not a right or wrong here. It can be yes or no, but it has to be one or the other. It can't be maybe, it can't be sometimes, to this question of, is it true? That's the first question. Is it true? So if I wrote about, or if you wrote about a relationship with your adult child and you had a thought like, they don't respect me because they're choosing different than I taught them growing up, right? That is the thought we had. They disrespect me because they're choosing differently. So we want to ask ourselves, is this true? Do you think this is true? And a lot of times that first question, our automatic reaction, our initial reaction is yes, because that's why it's a problem for us. We believe it's a problem for us because we believe it's true. So most of the time people will say, well, yeah, it is true, right? And so the point is that yes or no isn't wrong. You just want to look at it, right? It's the point of this is to get still and really get curious and discover what's true deep inside of you. So then once we've answered that question, and so your initial response is going to be yes. And then you go to the second question is, can you absolutely know this is true? Now, this is a similar question, but it's slightly different. This question is an opportunity for you to go deeper. If your answer is yes, then you would just move to question number 3. If you absolutely know this is true, you would say yes, and you'd move to number 3. But again, the answer is either yes or no, and neither one is wrong. However, you may find it more useful, to slow down and sit with this question. This is an opportunity to really consider that there are other alternatives. And most of the time, people end up saying no to this question, can they know absolutely that this is true? Because we can't know for sure. We can't absolutely know for sure. So in the example with your child, if you had an adult child and they're choosing differently, and you have this belief, they don't respect me because they are choosing differently, right? Do we absolutely know that is true? And if we slow it down a little bit, the answer may move to sometimes, right? Because there are those opportunities that you see that your child does respect you. And then you have other times where you think that they don't. So you can't answer for sure. We don't know what's going on in the mind of your child, right? We're making assumptions. So the answer usually is no to this question because we don't absolutely know for sure. So once we've answered those 2 questions, right, we're really getting down, is this really even a true belief? Then we go to question number 3, which is, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? Right? When Byron Katie is doing this work with someone, she'll have them write down a specific circumstance that is part of their inquiry. And that's the other thing that I teach as well, is the more specific we can get around a circumstance, so a situation, a conversation, right? Something specific happens, that's where we can pull it apart and really look at it and learn a lot. And it allows you to slow down and really pay attention to what's going on for you in this specific moment. So how are you feeling? How are you behaving when you had this thought? And asking yourself this question helps you step back and really become the observer of yourself. So if you had answered the previous 2 questions, right, and you found out that, the thought that you have that they disrespect you because they're choosing differently isn't necessarily true. You don't absolutely know it's true. So now we want to look at, how do you show up in that relationship? What happens for you? How do you react? You want to really become an observer of yourself and watch yourself. So maybe you feel hurt, right? You feel hurt. You're making it mean something about you. There's maybe some negative self-talk that somehow you failed and that you're not a good mother, right? Or you might talk to your husband and be critical of that child. Or you might talk to friends and talk about your child that way, right? And then you might notice as you kind of picture this in your head, you pull away, you're distant, you kind of avoid maybe conversations with that child, or if you're in a setting, you're distant and you don't really fully engage. And honestly, it's kind of like weird, right? So we're basically showing up in that relationship with not a lot of respect for that child, right? You're showing up in a way that is not respecting that child's agency, that child's ability to be who they want to be, and actually being disrespectful of God's plan. Because God's plan is that we came to earth to learn and grow and make mistakes and choose, right? That's one of the biggest things that we were sent to earth. The whole plan revolves around agency. And so when we show up in the way we are, when we have this belief that our child does not respect us, does not respect you, then you're going to show up in a way that is disrespectful. So you're doing the exact same thing as you believe your child is doing. It's so interesting, right? So then you have this vision in your head of how you are behaving when you have that thought. So this leads us to number 4. Question number 4. Who would you be without this thought? Who would you be without this thought? So in this same situation with you and your adult child, right? Who would you be if you did not have the thought that your child does not respect you? I love this question because it isn't about changing the situation, and it isn't even about changing the thought right away. It's more about slowing down and really meditating on this question so that you can see who you would be without that thought. It's opening up a possibility, right? You're seeing a picture that shows you something else that's possible. And then through the process, you may discover a new thought on the other side of this process. So if you didn't think that my child just does not respect me, right, then you wouldn't feel hurt. You wouldn't talk about that child behind his back. You wouldn't avoid that child. You wouldn't be looking for proof that this belief is true. You could just accept what is and move on. You wouldn't have to use all of your energy being hurt with him or yourself. Right? So now we've answered these questions, right? We've come to understand that this belief isn't absolutely true. We don't know for certain that this true is absolutely true. So we began questioning it, and now we compare and contrast. Here's how I'm showing up when I have this thought, and then here I am showing up without this thought. And we get to see those side by side. We get to weigh those out, right? We've answered these 4 questions. Now we can move on to the turnarounds. And this is a pretty powerful place to go. This is where the work can really sink in. Turnarounds are powerful, right? It's a powerful piece of this work. This is where you take an original thought and you turn it around. And it is a way of experiencing the opposite of what you believe to be true, right? So we're going to flip what you believe to be true totally upside down. And as long as you think that anyone or anything is responsible for your suffering, the situation is hopeless because we're placing the power to change this on someone else. It takes all of our power away. We stay stuck in this place of a victim in our story. But when we can visualize this situation, we can actually contemplate how each turnaround is as true or truer than the original thought. And this helps you move to self-realization. This is a powerful piece. So in the example of your thought about your adult child, right, the turnaround could be, I disrespect him or her, right? I disrespect him. And this could be true because I've been talking about you've been talking about your child, your son or daughter, right, behind their back. Or you've been ignoring him and not talking to him, right? I've been rude to my child. I've been disrespectful to my child. Or that would be a thought that you would replace it with, right? I'm so rude to him. And understanding that you're actually treating him, like I mentioned before on that question, is you're treating that child the way you were accusing him of being. Isn't that so interesting? So this turnaround thought is just as true as the original thought about your child disrespecting you. Another turnaround would be, I'm disrespecting me. I don't respect myself, right? You're trading a current moment for trying to control your child, right? And there are 3 kinds of business. There's your business, other people's business, and God's business. And we've got to stay in our own business. And when we find ourselves concerned about other people's business, we're fighting a losing battle. and we're not being kind to ourselves. The truth is that your happiness is not dependent on your adult child. And when you can truly believe this, that will set you free. When you believe that your happiness is dependent on that child doing certain things, you're not respecting yourself. You're not taking care of yourself. That's why the turnarounds are so powerful, because you can take an original thought and flip it around and get so much self-realization and awareness to help you choose differently, to help you show up how you want to in your life. So in the example we talked about, your adult child, right? This original thought, he does not respect me because he's choosing differently, right? It's not serving you. It's not helping you. And you can't know that it's absolutely true. So when you can loosen your grip on it and ask yourself these questions that I've shared with you, and then turn that thought around, you can get so much more clarity and the ability to choose on purpose who you want to be in that relationship or in any relationship, right? So just that idea of that original thought, he does not respect me because he's choosing differently, right? Doesn't serve you. You're actually disrespecting yourself and you're disrespecting them. Such great awareness and an opportunity to create change, create a new way of doing things. I love it so much. So that is how the work works. And I just want to share a couple of other nuggets that I have learned from Byron Katie as I've studied what she teaches. And I'll just share a few. It's not everything. It's just a few that I've pulled out that I thought would be fun to share. So as our thinking changes, the problems disappear. Isn't that powerful? Because all problems are thought problems. The other thing I learned is when we think we're doing the work on other people, we're actually doing the work on our thoughts about people, right? That's where the real problem is. It's what we think about other people. Another thing is suffering is optional. Suffering is a natural alarm, and it warns us that we're attaching to a certain thought. And when we don't listen, we come to accept that this suffering is an inevitable part of life, and it's not. It doesn't have to be. I also learned that inquiry is about noticing, not about dropping the thought. That's not possible. It's about realizing what's true for you through awareness and unconditional self-love, right? Once you can see the truth, the real truth, the thought lets go of you, not the other way around. Another thing I learned is arguing with reality means arguing with the story of a past. It's already over. No matter how much thinking in the world you do, you can't change it. And when you argue with reality, you only lose 100% of the time. We can't fight against what is, right? And the other thing I learned is seeing reality clearly means that you can act in the kindest, most appropriate, and most effective way. There's power in seeing reality clearly. I also learned that when you're mentally somewhere else, you miss real life. If we're so busy trying to run other people's business, whether it be other people or God, we miss real life. When we're arguing about reality, we're not living in the now and we're missing real life. I also learned until your story is met with understanding, there is no peace. We have to get to understanding so we can move to peace. So those are just a few nuggets that I love from Byron Katie. There's so many more. So I invite you to read her book so you can learn more for yourself. That's all I have for you today. And thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I hope you have a joyful week. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you hear, I would love it if you would share it with your friends and family and leave me a rating and review. If you'd like to learn more about what life coaching is, please schedule a free discovery call with me where we can work together through something that's causing you a problem. Just go to my website, seasons-coaching.com, and you can also find information about my Seasons of Joy one-on-one coaching program and my Seasons of Joy community. Have a joyful week, and I'll see you next time.